Hey guys, thank you so much for your patience while I was having some technical difficulties, and overall I was just pretty busy with life. While I was away, we did reach 500 subscribers on the channel, so thank you guys so much for watching my videos and giving my stuff just the time of day. It really does mean a lot to me, and I'm so happy that my content is helpful in some way for you new and returning players. A lot of you guys have been asking me to upload some sort of reliable farming guide for exotics and classified pieces, so I'm going to give you that today. Just for some background, I did not originally start this game on PC. I actually came over to PC from the PlayStation, and when the classified gear first came out, I was avidly playing the game on console and continued to play for many years after that, and I was participating in the global events to obtain the pieces that I needed. By the time I decided to pick the game up on PC, the global event schedule was wrapping up, so I really haven't done any global event activities on this account. Pretty much all of my classifieds and my exotics that I own were mostly obtained through the methods that I'll be sharing with you today. In almost any activity that you do, there will be somewhere between a 1 to 6% chance that a classified or exotic item will be rewarded from that. The idea is to pick an activity that you enjoy doing the most and sticking to that activity to farm for the items that you need. For example, a lot of players like to play Underground because it's a bit repetitive, but the rewards are generally pretty good. I personally think that Underground is really boring and it kind of puts me to sleep, so I don't like to play Underground at all. It's still a great place to farm for items, but not for me because I dislike Underground, and I would rather play a different activity. I'll start off by listing all of the different ways that you can obtain classified gear and exotic items, in no particular order. I'll also give you the percentage chances for the drops if I know what the percentages are. To start things off, I'd like to explain the weekly assignment method. Anytime you complete your weekly assignment, you will be rewarded with a guaranteed exotic item. Each character has 3 weekly assignments that they can complete. Those are the Underground, Survival, and General weekly assignments. If you need any help with the General weekly, I do have a helpful video for this, and I will put it in the description of this video. Generally, the weekly assignments do take quite a bit of time to complete, but the video that I uploaded helps make that process a bit faster. You can usually get it done within an hour or so. The next method is by doing legendary missions and heroic incursions. The challenging incursions do not reward the exotic, unfortunately, but if you do the legendary missions or the heroic difficulty incursions, you do get a guaranteed exotic cash upon completion of the mission. Select legendary missions will also spawn hunters during the final boss wave. As long as you or your party have not died throughout the mission or restarted the mission or any checkpoints at any time, the hunter will absolutely spawn and they will absolutely drop an exotic item. Legendary mission completion has a pretty good chance to reward you with classified gear. This would be amongst the final 4 reward items on completion. I'm not exactly sure on the percentage, but it's fairly high. It's somewhere between 20 to 35, 36%. Incursions also have a 6% chance to drop designated exotics, and those exotics are the Warlord in Falcon's Lost, Medved in Clear Sky, Golden Rhino in Dragon's Nest, and the Damascus in Stolen Signal. The next method is by doing challenging missions. The Urban MDR and the Showstopper drop from any challenging mission. The Barrett's Bulletproof Chest Piece drops in Lexington Event Center by Luray Barrett. The Shortbow Knee Pads will drop in Madison Field Hospital. Pharaoh's Mask will drop in Napalm Production Site by Joe Farrow. And Colonel Bliss's Holster will drop in General Assembly by the big man himself. To my knowledge, you cannot obtain any classified gear from challenging missions at all. I don't think that it drops from bosses. I don't think you can get it from completing the mission either. Pretty sure that challenging missions is a no-go for classified gear. The next method is open world bosses. This one is really straightforward. There are 15 open world bosses that respawn every 4 hours after you eliminate them, and they can be farmed across all of your characters. Bosses in the open world have a 6% chance for both exotics and classified gear, and it's very possible to obtain both an exotic and a classified gear item in one drop. I've had that happen many times before. Another thing I like about the open world bosses is that there is no limitations to their exotic loot pool. Obviously, the only exotics that won't drop from these bosses are the ones that are for sale inside the terminal. I did upload a video on my route for taking out the open world bosses, so I will put that in the description as well if you would like to check that out. One way that you can obtain classified items is from the Season Pass supply drop. If you have the Season Pass, you get a supply drop twice a month in the open world. You'll get it on the 1st and the 15th of every month. I believe there's a 10% chance to obtain a classified item in this supply drop. I'm not 100% sure on the percentage, but I believe it's 10%, and I don't know if you can get exotics out of there or not. Another method is by doing your high value targets or HVTs. I believe HVT bosses have a 3% chance to drop classified gear. The Hilder and Air have somewhere between a 1 to 6% chance to drop from the HVT bosses. I'm not exactly sure what the percentage actually is. I'm leaning more towards 1% though, because it's really hard to get them, it seems like. The next method is from your field proficiency caches. Each cache has a 1 to 3% chance for exotics and a 3 to 6% chance for classified gear. This one is also possible to obtain both the exotic and the classified. I've had that happen many times. I have a method for farming proficiency caches in the description of the video if you'd like to check that out. Moving on now to the DLC methods, I'll start with Underground. You can earn underground caches just for leveling up in the underground, and those have a 3 to 6% chance to reward classifieds. I actually don't know if they give you exotic items. I don't think I've ever gotten an exotic from an underground cache before. The bosses in the underground have a 3% chance on normal, 6% on hard, and 9% on challenging to reward exotic items. To my knowledge, they will only give you exotic weapons. I don't think they give you exotic gear. The percentages for classified gear is 1% on normal, 4% on hard, and 6% on challenging. Hunters also have a chance to spawn in random points in the underground. It's usually after you clear certain waves, and those hunters have a 12% chance to drop exotics and a 6% chance to give classifieds. I have personally not been lucky enough to get any exotics or classifieds from the hunters before, so I don't know if this percentage is true. If it is true, I'm just really unlucky. And finally, there is a secret crate in Underground that can pop up sometimes, and that crate has a 3% chance to give both exotics and classified gear. The next DLC is Survival. Survival caches have somewhere from a 1 to 3% chance to give you exotics, and supposedly they have a higher percentage rate for classified gear, like around 15 or 17% or something, but I've never been that lucky with them. You can extract up to 9 survival caches per session, and usually a session takes about an hour to successfully complete. You earn the caches by taking out the DZ bosses or by reaching a specific amount of XP within the session. The last DLC is Last Stand and Skirmish. Every 5 levels above level 40 will reward you with 1 classified cache. Last Stand, Skirmish, and PvP proficiency caches have a 1 to 3% chance for exotics and a 3 to 6% chance for classified gear. The PvP proficiency caches are earned after level 99 within Last Stand or Skirmish, and they level up similar to field proficiency caches in the main game. That's going to wrap up the methods for the DLCs. I'll move on now to Westside Piers and Resistance. In Westside Piers, the bosses from the Eliminate the Lieutenant activity have a 1% chance to drop exotics. To my knowledge, they only drop exotic gear and not weapons. They will not drop the ninja bike bag though for some reason. Bosses also have a 3 to 6% chance to drop classified gear, and the drone couriers have a 3% chance to drop exotics and a 5 to 6% chance to drop classifieds. There's quite a few different ways to get drops in Resistance. One of them is from tier 2 plus caches that you get from wave 10 and up. Those have a 25% chance for exotics, and they start off with a 12.5% chance for classifieds, and the classified percentage goes up by 2.5% for every 5 waves, but the exotic chance stays the same at 25%. The reward crate is also probably the best way in Resistance to actually get classified gear, because it has a 61% chance. There is a 15% chance from that crate to get exotics, and then the remaining percentage is just basic gear. So keep in mind that if you farm this crate, you have still a somewhat decent chance of getting just basic gear set items instead of the classifieds, and you still have a pretty decent chance at exotics too. And the bosses from the boss waves have a 3% chance to drop specific exotics, and those are the Caduceus, the Tenebrae, and the Skull Gloves. There are a few different methods for obtaining exotics and classified gear from some of the vendors that are in the game, specifically the special equipment vendor that is inside Camp Clinton and the terminal. They sell a classified gear cache for 2,500 Phoenix credits, and this cache rewards 1 guaranteed classified gear piece. The only downside is that it's only one piece and it's 2,500 Phoenix credits, which is a lot. But if you have quite a bit of credits to spare and you're looking for something to spend it on, this is a really good way to do that. Supposedly, the basic gear set caches in this vendor also have a 1% chance to reward either an exotic or a classified gear piece. I have not gotten one of these before from those caches, but to be fair, I'm not actually buying those caches because it's just a basic gear cache. So you could get really lucky and get something from this, but I actually don't know if that's true. And like I mentioned before, this vendor also sells the select exotic weapons. These weapons are not in the exotic loot pool anywhere else, so you can only obtain these by buying them from this vendor. And the final method that we're going to talk about is the Dark Zone. All of the Dark Zone bosses, whether they be from landmarks, supply drops, or contaminated event bosses, they have a 5 to 6% chance to give you exotics and classified gear. The same thing goes for the locked crates that you find in most landmarks. They are also a 5 to 6% chance. The contaminated events have a 5% chance to give you classified gear when you clear the contaminated event. You also have a 1 to 3% chance for both exotics and classifieds from manhunt caches, banshee caches, and bounty caches. Supply drops have a 2% chance to reward the Thompson or the Tommy gun exotics. They have a 5 to 6% chance to reward you with a classified gear item as well. If you claim the supply drop, these rewards go straight into your inventory and you don't have to extract them. Supposedly, the vendor inside the Dark Zone checkpoints have a 1% chance for exotics and classified gear from the sealed caches that you can buy. I've never gotten something from these before, but I do remember stories of my friends getting them on console, so it's probably possible, but I've never gotten one before. The Dark Zone leaderboards also have a really high chance for exotics, as long as you're placed within a higher tier. I have just recently received a medium and a large Dark Zone leaderboard cache, and both of them contained an exotic. I want to say that the large Dark Zone cache is a guaranteed exotic, but I'm not 100% sure. To my knowledge, you do not receive classified gear as a reward from the leaderboard, it's only exotics. Those are going to be all of the methods for obtaining classified gear and exotic items in the game. Now it all comes down to choosing which method you would prefer. But with that being said, I'd like to share my personal favorite methods out of all of them, and I'll explain why I think the ones that I like are the most efficient methods out of all of them. I'll start off by explaining the resistance method. I personally don't like resistance. It's really similar to the underground experience to me, where it's just really boring and repetitive. However, it is probably the most effective way to obtain the most amount of classified pieces in a really short amount of time. The best way to make the most out of resistance is by farming the reward crate on Pier 93. I'll give a brief explanation of how to farm the reward crate, and maybe I'll make a more in-depth guide on this soon, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to make it as short as I can, and all you're really doing is farming the tech that drops from eliminating NPCs. You will hoard these points as much as possible by a few different methods. The best way is on the boss wave. You don't have to eliminate the boss as soon as the boss spawns in. It's actually recommended to leave them alive until the last few seconds so you can farm points from the other NPCs, because the other NPCs will continue to spawn in as long as the boss is alive. You can also farm points on the objective scan waves because you can wait for the last second before scanning the objective, and all you have to do is be within the radius. You don't actually have to have it completed within the time limit. Once you have a lot of points racked up, you can then dump all of these points into the reward crate. You can usually get around 3 to 5 chances at this crate by wave 15, which doesn't take very long to do. I'll more than likely come out with a better guide for this because I had mentioned in last week's restock video that there was a good LVOA that you could pick up for this that utilizes commanding and determined on the bottom slot, and I will explain that more in that video because it's going to make more sense if I just do it that way. So stay tuned for the resistance crate farm in the future, but if you don't want to wait for me to upload that, there are other people that have uploaded that content already that do a really good job of showcasing it. But for now, I'll move on to my next favorite method for farming. The next method that I like is just doing legendary missions. Lately I'm getting into the swing of doing these by myself. I'm a bit more of an antisocial person, so I don't like to play in a team too often. However, doing the legendary missions in a team is going to be the fastest way to clear them. I'm okay with pretty much any of the legendary missions, so I like to just matchmake for a random one and I'll almost always get in one right away. Completing these missions for the first time within the week will reward you with a guaranteed exotic cache, plus an additional exotic drop from any hunters that may spawn. If you join a random group, I would say 8 out of 10 times the other players will drop their exotics that they earn from their caches because they usually don't need them. You also have a chance at earning classified gear for completing the legendary missions. I would say that doing these missions is more part of the fun than it is going straight for the exotics. It's definitely not the most efficient way to farm for them because it does take a little bit of time and effort, but I would say for the work that you put in, it's a pretty fair way to get them. I would have to say that my second favorite farming method, it has to be the Dark Zone, specifically for the consistency and the drop percentages. The loot pool is wide open for the exotics, so you can get all of the exotics, obviously besides the ones that are for sale. Landmarks in the Dark Zone are very close together, and not all bosses are actually inside landmarks. Some of them are cleaner bosses that are inside large contaminated areas like the underground subways, or just the contaminated areas and tucked in some of the corners of the map. And oftentimes those areas are next to landmarks or even locked crates. All bosses and locked crates have a 5 to 6% chance for both exotics and classified pieces. Not to mention whenever a supply drop comes down or a contaminated event begins, that's additional bosses to farm. Obviously you do have to extract this loot, which is where things can get complicated. I know a lot of players don't always like to play the Dark Zone, especially if you're trying to avoid PvP. After enough practice in the Dark Zone and with enough luck, you should be able to extract loot without too many complications. I would say my favorite farming route at the moment is DZ5 to DZ6. There are a lot of cleaner bosses to take out, as well as close by landmarks to clear. I can essentially do a great big circle in DZ5 and 6 to fill my contaminated bag within a few minutes. Also, by participating in DZ activities, you usually will advance yourself higher up into the leaderboards. If you reach high enough into the tier, you will be rewarded with exotics once the leaderboard time is complete. You can collect your rewards from this at the base of operations at the rewards claim vendor. And finally, my all-time favorite method for farming exotics, and probably the most unexpected, is open world bosses. Yep, that's right. Open world boss farming is one of the most efficient ways to farm for exotics and classified pieces. While most activities range from 1 to 6%, the open world bosses have a static percentage of 6% for both exotics and classified gear. Considering there's up to 15 bosses to take out, I'll usually get 1 to 2 exotics or classifieds on my route. The bosses respawn every 4 hours, which gives me plenty of time to do other activities, and you can do this activity across all of your characters. The whole route only takes about 15 minutes to do, so this method is perfect for a player like myself who has a bit of a short attention span and really doesn't like to farm all that much. In my opinion, farming the open world bosses is going to be the most effective and efficient way to get your exotics and classified pieces. I think that's going to wrap up today's video. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys, and I know it was definitely long overdue, so thank you again, as usual, for being very patient for me to upload this. I will work on that resistance farming video next. I think I already have the footage for it, so I just need to throw it together and do some commentary and stuff. But after that, I would love some ideas on what to upload next. Go ahead and give me your requests in the comments below, and thank you guys so much as usual. I will see you next time.